Main reason I've got you on today is to speak about the announced undercard for Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. A tremendous slate of fights there. We'll sort of pick them through one by one. We'll start with Chris Eubank Jr., which has probably received the most negative response so far. When you saw the opponent, Cerameta, obviously
Sarah
been
Meta, yeah.
of Golovkin before.
Yeah.
He's been up at that level, but he's not got the wins.
Mangur, Golovkin. Yeah, he's been there. I think, yeah, Chris Eubank Jr. is at a pivotal stage now. I think that victory in the rematch over Liam Smith was almost a punch-perfect performance from him, and I do believe he's going to get one or two really, really big fights in the next 12 months. He's one of those fighters who's been a little bit of an enigma through his career. Um, his father was always eccentric and one of those, an outstanding world legend, Chris Eubank Sr. in his own right. But Junior's done really well. I think he's had a lot of pressure on him because of the name, carrying that all the way through. He's an intelligent young man. He's had to deal with a horrendous family tragedy with his beloved brother, Seb. Yeah, they're a good group. I like them very much. You know, Emily Eubank and the whole crew. And Chris is now at a position where he needs to perform and he needs to perform regularly. And I think this is the right sort of fight for him. Yeah, people will maybe criticize the opponent. I think it's really hard. Turkey Al Sheikh and the team that he's got around him, including obviously our guys like Eddie and Frank and George and Spencer, but really his team as well in Saudi that put these matches, these cards together, and a lot, I believe, having spoken to Spencer and Eddie and Frank about it, are from him himself. And I think that it's tough because everyone's now expecting the world's best 50-50 fights. And we all know boxing can't do that all the time. At our level at GBM, we try to put on 50-50s or 55-45s pretty much through the card, or certainly the TV chunk of it. And even that's really tough at its level because you want your young fighters to improve and to keep moving forward. But at the same time, you want those big tests for TV, and the fans want them. And I think what Turkey's provided is these great fights, and Beterbiev and Bivol is another one of those, a phenomenal, almost fantasy fight. We would have thought that a couple of years ago, but these fantasy fights are becoming reality. And the trouble is that if you think I'm going to do that in every single one of them, it's nigh on impossible in the boxing world because the guys on the left meant to beat the guys on the right. Arguably, that's how promoters sort of see things, certainly on the way up. They need those tests. They need to be built properly into world champions. It takes time. But then the opponents, so to speak, have got to now almost be as good or better than the left side. So it's a really difficult problem, I guess, a puzzle that they've got because they can't continually put these fights on that people are going to say, okay, Chris Eubank could easily lose this fight, or for example, I think he wins the fight. He's obviously a hot favourite, but it's the right sort of fight for him at the time. And you look at the rest of the card, and there's two or three that stand out as wow, bang. You know, you look at that as a Saturday Fight Night show or a top of the bill. And I think on September 21st at Wembley, we've got plenty of that. I think that's a very, very strong card. But then people look at AJ Dubois and they're heavily siding with Anthony Joshua on that, which I think personally is a little unfair on Daniel Dubois and his recent form. And as I think we've spoken about before, had a good chat with Don Charles and Ben Davidson a couple of days ago, and they believe they're the underdog, the Dubois team, but they believe that they're going to win and they're going to win by knockout. And I think that maybe Turkey's looking at that and thinking, okay, AJ should come through that, but with Bivol and Beterbiev and maybe Usyk and Fury, there's more jeopardy there. So he's probably looked at it and thought Bivol Beterbiev is an outstanding fight, which certainly in trade terms, in our terms, is one of the greatest fights we'll see in the last 2, 3, 4 years. In casual terms, you walk down the street, how many people know who Artur Beterbiev is? How many people know who Dmitry Bivol is? Some, not that many, outside of the boxing crowd. So I think it's clever. You put a name like Chris Eubank Jr. on, you put a fantastic fight like Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clark on, was the domestic fight, maybe arguably again with Chisora Joyce, but certainly one of them of recent times. You know, or you expect that to be a humdinger again, but it certainly is a 50-50 as you look at it. Then you put on the first women's world title fight in the region, which is an absolute perler between Sky Nicholson and Raven Chapman. So you're putting those really close fights on, pick 'em fights maybe, slight favourites maybe either way, but much closer. And then you look at Chris Eubank, or you look at maybe the Ben Whittaker fight, which is it's interesting. Liam Cameron is an unbelievable story, an incredible story. And I know that, for example, Turkey loves Mark Chamberlain, but Liam Cameron's the sort of guy that has come back from, like Tyson Fury, to come back from almighty problems, and he's rebuilt himself, and he's only 33, I think, still, and he's still fighting. And he put in a great performance against Lyndon Arthur last time. And yes, of course, Ben Whittaker should win the fight, but it's a chance for Liam Cameron. It's a chance for Joe Cordina. Shakur Stevenson is one of my favourite fighters of the last 5-10 years. I think he's outstanding. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful signature for Matchroom. Would I have advised Joe Cordina to take the fight? Look, it depends. He wants to go straight back into the fire. He's a fighter who dreams of the big occasion. He'll be getting well paid for it. It's an amazing opportunity, chance, a golden one, to become the first person to beat Shakur Stevenson. But he's coming off, a terrible defeat against Anthony Kakache, where it all went wrong for him and on the inside, and he just didn't get his game going. And I'm a big Joe Cordina fan. I think he's done brilliantly to become a world champion. But that's a tough ask to go straight back in against Shakur. And that's hats off to him and his new training team down with Ben and Barry. And it's a real challenge. And it looks like a really, really tough fight. But you've got the names like Shakur and Chris Eubank. See what I'm saying? And then you sprinkle in the 50-50s. And I think people cannot complain about this card at all. I think I've seen a lot of criticism that some of the fights are really one-sided. I think that's unfair to expect fight after fight to be, you really don't know. And coming from working at Sky at the top level with box office fights, we couldn't do that. We tried to do as much of that as we could, but it's impossible to run a card like that financially, promotional wise for the fighter. You're arguing with the promoter then who are saying, no, that's too big a test at this point. You can't do that. But now working with a new up-and-coming promoter like Izzy Asif and GBM, and seeing how we're trying to give DAZN the best matches with unbeaten talent, possibly taking on unbeaten talent or near unbeaten, or a couple of losses and crossroads fights and all those sort of things, it's really hard. And actually to pull off that sort of a card is quite something. So we're really pleased at GBM of doing that on the 27th of Sheffield, the week after AJ, at our level. And I think that Turkey Al Sheikh has put on a tremendous card on September the 21st. Underneath, it's not even a card, it's an event underneath or supporting AJ and Dubois. And I think it's wrong really to criticise this one. I think that it's a clever card. It's a much watch card. It involves so many of our promoters coming together, especially Ben Shalom, who's got plenty on this and has really got involved now with that big win for Martin Bakole. So it's great seeing Ben get the opportunity, and it thrives GBM and Izzy, and he's thinking, okay, Ben's up there now, and Calais and Nissa are up there. I've got to find a fighter that's going to impress Turkey. Could it be Shaq Thompson? Could it be Kieran Malloy? Who's it going to be? Tiernan Bradley is one of these fighters who's going to get one of those opportunities, because Liam Cameron has got an amazing opportunity, hasn't he? Jack Massey, another one with a fantastic opportunity. Jaya Pataya, another of the pound-for-pound best, but Massey coming off a really good win against Isaac Chamberlain. You've got to go for it. If you're in Massey's camp, if you're looking after him, Kevin Murray and the team, they've got to go for this. They can't not. It's an opportunity that, hey, if they lose, they'll come back and they'll have earned money, and their reputation hopefully will continue, and he can come down a level. If he upsets the world, if he causes an incredible dramatic victory over Opataya, then he's suddenly, like we saw with Bakole and Jared Anderson, suddenly boxing turns really, really quickly. So I think they're providing fantastic opportunities. It's saying, okay, you go and perform in one or two good fights at European level or domestic level back home, and we're going to get you. We're going to bring you onto to our stage. So I think it's a really, really good night's boxing, and we haven't even talked about the main event, which is why we'll all be watching.